This is me, a gobbo. And what I want to know is, can I take the Dwarf Holds of Carrick Ungor, Carrick Varn, Ekrund, Mount Gumbad, Mount Silverspear, Carrick Eight Peaks, Carrick Asgal, and Carrick Draz, in that order using only Goblin and Goblin adjacent units, as well as a generic Goblin Lord before the Dwarfs endgame scenario triggers after turn 100? I'm not sure, but before we find out, I hear you cry why? Why am I doing this? For what possible reason? Well, I'll tell you why. Because this is the Goblin Wars. A time when the dwarfs were severely weakened by their prolonged war with the elves. Check out my latest video here. To make matters worse, a Slan by the name of Lord Quex used the geomantic web to shift the continents, causing huge earthquakes which damaged the defences and security of the Karazhan. This allowed the Skaven and the Greenskins much easier access to an already weakened Dwarfen Empire, as one by one the holds of the dwarfs fell, and that is what we'll be attempting to recreate in our campaign today.
I'm the Warlord of Eight Peaks, you remember that?
You know the drill by now. Change the starting settlement to the one I've called Night Goblin Tunnels, as the goblins initially came up from deep underground. The map changes are focused around the World's Edge Mountains, allowing the dwarfs to start with their rightful holds, and placing Greenskin and Skaven factions in and around them. I got started by recruiting my generic lord, a Night Goblin warboss by the name of Grotzlik, and then giving him all of Skarsnik's units and disbanding Skarsnik, who I won't be able to use until I've captured Carrick Eight Peaks. Over the next few turns I acquired tech that buffed my gobbos, and recruited as many gobbos as possible, including a hero by the name of Luggan Necksnapper. Nice.
Night Gobbos, big boss.
My plan was to move into the northern World's Edge Mountains and take Carrick Ungor. It was a minor settlement, so I didn't think it would be too much trouble. The only issue being that Ungrim Ironfist is an absolute bastard, and probably the most dangerous legendary lord we would face during our campaign. And here I was declaring war on him immediately.
No.
If we couldn't get past Ungrim, then we would have little chance of achieving our objectives. The first step would be to take Khazad Urkalaz, which we managed to do without any real threat to Grotzlik and the boys. With Grotzlik a couple levels higher, I spent his points on the only line that mattered, the Gobbos. Next I recruited Snide Spearthrower. There was no way I'd be able to beat Ungrim with just one army. One of the strengths of goblins is that they're ridiculously cheap, so we'd play the numbers game and beat our enemies with a green tide. I pushed on Carrick Ungor, the first of the objective settlements and the first dwarf hold to fall in the lore, renaming it Red Eye Mountain after the Red Eye tribe that conquered it. I moved Grotzlik back to Urkalaz as I'd spotted Ungrim making his way towards us. I'd need both armies to deal with him. On the next turn, Ungrim had besieged us, so I got Snidey to march up behind him to hopefully overwhelm him with numbers, which worked pretty well as we managed to box him in together on the slopes of Khazad Urkalaz. I originally planned to play defensively and bring the dwarfs to us, but with our reinforcements coming in from behind Ungrim's army, I hatched a plan to push out, fully surround the dwarfs and annihilate them. I had my nasty skulkers on the left and my squig hoppers on the right, covering all angles. I also had these trolls which were part of the settlement garrison, so I planned to charge them in first and get them killed as they weren't goblins. Now I know what you're thinking, hey, that's not a goblin, that's a giant spider, and you'd be correct, but goblins. And also hey, that's a squig, but also goblins? I tried to time everything to happen at the same time, so as my reinforcements arrived, all my units pushed forward to surround the Dwarfen army. The plan was in motion and was going perfectly. I had Snidey buffing individual units so they would gain the advantage. Ungrim's Slayers were tough, but they had a fatal flaw: 0 armour, making them extremely susceptible to goblin arrows. The battle was going well, and we were gaining the upper hand in multiple areas. Ungrim's forces were either dead, dying or fleeing, and the battle was almost won. But there was a problem, and his name was Ungrim Ironfist. He was too angry, and too stubborn to die, and his mohawk too perfect to go down without a fight. He killed every goblin that challenged him. For anyone that's experienced fighting Ungrim, you know this pain. This guy literally will not die, and forget anti-large or anti-infantry, he's anti-everything. So I did the only thing a good warboss would do. I created a fighting arena around him using my troops, and pitted him against different units, lords and heroes, while sticking him with arrows. And it still took so long to take him down I had to speed up the footage. Eventually though, Ungrim fell to the green tide of goblins before him, and the battle was ours. With Ungrim gone, I'd bought myself a little bit of time before he'd be able to trouble me again, so I used that time upgrading my goblin archers with Skarsnik's death juice, and then taking the rest of the northern province. I needed to cripple Carrick Cadrin to stop them from fielding powerful armies, so I enacted the first of the campaign in an attempt to raise Carrick Cadrin. I then tunnelled Grotzlik nearby to prepare him to attack the city next turn, and Snidey from the other direction to squeeze the dwarfs and take them all out in one fell swoop. I did my best to remember to disband orcs from my armies, but sometimes later on I did forget. The only non-goblin lord I'd be using this campaign was an orc by the name of Urk Grimfang, whose War was responsible for capturing Mount Silverspear. This was it, Grotzlik was going for it, payback for Ungrim being such an unkillable bastard. With the war successful, I turned my attention towards Zufbar, who'd been expanding out of the mountains in an attempt to fight the Black Pit tribe, but in doing so, they had left their homeland and capital fairly undefended, so the Gobbos sniffed out an opportunity. With Zufbar easily raised, both them and Carrick Cadrin would be severely weakened. I needed to head in the direction of Carrick Varn, so Grotzlik and Du Bois continued their rampage across Zufbar along the way. As we got close to Carrick Varn, Zufbar, it seemed, had been marching back to try and stop me. I prepped myself for a fight as I ended the turn, but to my surprise it wouldn't be Grotzlik who'd be fighting. Carrick Cadrin had launched a surprise attack on Snidey back at Khazad Urkelaz. The Gobbos would have to stop the dwarfs' advance here, or all the territory we had claimed so far in the north would be lost. The terrain had 2 choke points, so I thought it best to make use of them and create a goblin death zone the dwarfs would have to march into. Every available git lined up and prepared for the stunties to attack. And I know what you're thinking. Hey, those aren't goblins, those are mangler squigs. But goblins. The dwarfs massively outranged us, so I had the squig hoppers ride around their lines and get into the back of their forces. I had the mangler squigs engage their infantry first, which caused so much chaos. As the dwarfs came into the death zone, all the goblin archers opened fire. It was a bloodbath. If things for the dwarfs weren't bad enough, the greenskins were numerous enough that their collective psychic energy culminated into a war. And it wasn't long before the dwarfs had been bested strategically, outnumbered, and were running for their lives. The green tide broke rank and charged in, chasing down stragglers and survivors. And with that, the battle was won and the northern World's Edge Mountains secure. With Carrick Cadrin once again put down, it was time for Grotzlik to take Carrick Varn. 2 smaller armies and a garrison protected the hold, but Grotzlik went for it. The dwarfs desperately tried to repel the greenskin invaders on the cold, snow-covered slopes of the Black Mountains. While Grotzlik and the Gits got set up on the high ground, I sent in the squig hoppers to try and take out any exposed quarrellers. The dwarfs tried to charge our hillside position, but we were too entrenched already. Dwarf blood splattered across the ice and snow. Trying to get absolutely everything I could out of the speed of the squig hoppers, I tried to daringly manoeuvre them through the dwarf lines to get at the grudge throwers. Unfortunately, many squig hoppers got caught and killed doing so. Despite that, the main army had barely taken any casualties and were ready to fight. The dwarfs had reinforcements coming in from the lower slopes, but using the remnants of the War army that had raised Carrick Cadrin, I sent Arachnarok spiders to crush the newcomers. Zufbar still had more reinforcements pouring in, so Grotzlik ordered his goblins to charge downhill at them, stopping them from reaching their kin. And with that, the defenders of Carrick Varn were defeated, and another objective was ours. Despite our victory against Zufbar, Carrick Cadrim was yet again causing more problems. Ungrim was back. Like a true dwarf, he held a grudge for the razing of his city, and he wasn't about to let it go without a fight. So once again, we did battle with the unkillable Slayer. I had a vast army of goblins at my disposal, but no reinforcements would be coming in from behind Ungrim this time. I pulled all my forces into a choke point between two rock formations and waited for the dwarfs to come to me. Except, they held their ground, so I had to improvise. I sent Snidey out to cast some magic at them in an attempt to poke them and draw them out.
Beard Leader, come in. Do you read me? Aye, this is Beard Leader, go ahead. There appears to be some Groby riding towards us on Wolfback. Should we engage or prepare for evasive manoeuvres? Negative, just hold position.
And that's what they did. They sat there in their gyrocopters while Snidey blasted away at them with green magic, which suited us just fine. This finally did the trick, and soon enough I had to pull back as dwarfs very slowly, but angrily, walked towards us. Snidey unfortunately wasn't able to take out all the gyrocopters, and I couldn't finish them off before they dropped a payload on my spider riders. The goblin lines stayed put as the dwarfs finally engaged them in melee. Hundreds of slayers piled in as goblin archers took down as many as they could. The nasty skulkers tried their best to stop the dwarfs from flanking the main force. Across the battlefield it seemed like we were gaining the advantage, but once again Ungrim was killing 10 goblins for every dwarf that died. But the goblins were vicious and cunning, and whilst Ungrim was locked down, we focus fired and targeted specific dwarf units until the only one left standing was once again Ungrim. So we surrounded him and used the only method known to work for killing this particular dwarf. Shoot him and stab him over and over again with every unit available whilst trying not to get hit yourself until you win. And if that doesn't work, surround him in a goblin death ball. Eventually though, we got the job done, and I realised that raising Carrick Cadrin wasn't enough. This absolute madman had to be stopped once and for all. So I sent Grotzlik back up north, and between him, Snidey and Urk, I was hoping they would be able to fully destroy Ungrim's entire faction. This army defending Nashrak's lair was the only army left standing, so if they were defeated, the rest of Carrick Cadrin would follow. Things were looking in our favour. Urk Grimfang was coming to reinforce, and we held the high ground against lightly armoured dwarfs. The dwarfs tried their best to break our lines, but even our weakened goblins knew that the dwarfs were close to defeat, especially as Urk Grimfang came charging down the mountain. There was a particular dwarf slayer whose head he wanted. With their leader's head removed, the dwarfs retreated as quickly as they could back down the mountain and walked the long road back to any dwarf settlement still standing. Over the next few turns, Carrick Cadrin's final settlements fell and the entire northern World's Edge mountains were under Greenskin control. Oh god, you don't know how happy it makes me to see that. Our war had finally come to an end, and we were given a whole load of gold and scrap, which I used to field more goblins and purchase more scrap upgrades. So it was finally time for us to make our way towards Ekrund. Unfortunately, Snidey tunnelled himself within movement range of Thorgrim Grudgebearer's army and another full stack, so I had to quickly tunnel Grotzlik back so that if Thorgrim came for us we'd be better prepared. And of course, over the turn, the Dwarf High King couldn't help himself. The dwarfs marched through the underway alongside their king, hoping to stem the green tide. But Grotzlik, Luggan Necksnapper, Slider Meiser, and Snide Spearthrower had other plans. The underway was eerily silent as the two forces approached each other. I really did my best to take out their gyro bombers, but once again the dwarfs blew us up. I noticed that the dwarfs had sent their ranged units up front to try and get in range, so I attempted a risky play by endangering the lives of all my squig hoppers in an attempt to take out all of their ranged units. Which worked reasonably well and kept their ranged units tied up in melee, as my infantry charged in whilst under the effects of the war. In these tight tunnels there was barely any room to flank or get behind the dwarfs. We would have to break their lines if we wanted to get through. Snidey was busy debuffing large groups of dwarfs. And if we couldn't flank them, then Luggan Necksnapper would unleash squigs behind their lines. Grotzlik was admittedly getting handily beaten by Thorgrim. The Arachnarok was getting a tasty meal of stunties. And Thorgrim had made a major error in coming into the battle on a massive throne. As he was larger than everyone else, he was an easy target for my archers. And just when he thought he was going to get away, Grotzlik came and stabbed him in the back like a true gobbo. And with their king dead, the rest of the dwarfs ran for their lives. With Thorgrim dead and Karazakarak rarely undefended, I thought I'd make the same play as I did against Kadrin and raise Thorgrim's capital during a war. This was admittedly a lot easier than I anticipated. I know they didn't have an army defending them, but it was Karazakarak after all. I split my forces up and had majority of the goblin infantry and archers sneaking in on the right hand side. I was going to take Karazakarak from right under their beards. My reinforcements came in from the other side, forcing the dwarfs to split their defenders up even more as I captured their gate, as squigs and goblins flooded into the city. Once we were in, we ran through their meagre defences and captured all the key points. It was the easiest battle that Grotzlik and the Gits had fought so far, resulting in another swift and successful war. But Thorgrim was back and giving chase. I decided to tunnel away from him, knowing that he might be able to catch us in the underway, but we managed to escape. Over the turns, Grotzlik and Snidey continued moving closer to Ekrund, where I declared war on yet another dwarf faction, and began capturing the province around Ekrund. Soon enough, all the gobbos were in position around Ekrund, and with the armies of Greybeard's prospectors having moved south, it had only a single garrison defending it. The outer provincial defences of Ekrund had already fallen to the Greenskins. The settlement's defenders were ready to give their lives defending their hold. I pushed the battering ram up to take down the gate whilst the rest of the Gits ascended the walls. When my reinforcements arrived, I was pleased, but I was also concerned because they were literally coming out of the walls. Oh well, at least they were arriving in true goblin fashion. The battering ram had been doing good work on the gate, and it wasn't long before it fell. And who flooded inside? Oh, you know it was the squig hoppers. The archers were busy spreading death juice on the defenders on the walls. And it wasn't long before all my lords, heroes and squigs were running rampant through the settlement, killing any last survivors and taking the mines for the Greenskins. Another dwarf settlement had fallen. Ekrund was ours. I needed to be able to defend Ekrund whilst Grotzlik and Snidey pushed on to take more holds, so I recruited another war boss by the name of DWARFS. It was now the time for Urk Grimfang, whose defensive duties had been taken over by a shaman by the name of Zajar. Urk besieged Mount Gumbad on the way to his real prize, Mount Silverspear. The foe that the dwarfs faced at Gumbad was not only goblins, but a powerful orc warboss. And Urk had no time for these sneaky goblin tactics that Grotzlik and Snidey had been using. He was an orc, and that meant charging in and fighting, and that's exactly what him and his gits did. Urk ordered the weakest of the gobos to be launched at the walls of Gumbad. The dwarfen defenders had never seen such a terrible sight before. They couldn't hold against such a deranged foe. Urk smashed the dwarfs to pieces and took Gumbad for himself. Another war had come to an end, this time giving us the jackpot, meaning that I basically had enough scrap to outfit all my armies with upgrades. While Urk was moving towards Silverspear, Grotzlik and Snidey moved in towards Carrick 8 Peaks. And Urk continued his rampage across Karazakarak's territory. There were a lot of dwarfs and Skaven in and around the final 3 settlements, so I recruited another lord by the name of Ugrok Throatcruncher to assist Grotzlik and Snidey. It was time. Urk had made it to Mount Silverspear, but to his surprise it had already fallen to Skaven. He was disappointed that he wouldn't be able to fight more stunties, but the rats would have to do. I worriedly declared war on Clan Moors, who were strength rank 3. It wasn't the earth-shattering battle that Urk wanted, but he had taken Mount Silverspear, which was swiftly renamed to Mount Grimfang in honour of the orc himself. Now that we were at war with Clan Moors, there was nothing for it. I'd gathered up the gobos and made my play for Carrick 8 Peaks. Carrick 8 Peaks was already a mockery of the great Dwarf Hold it once was. The ratmen scurried through the halls, alarmed at the approaching invaders, as the stench was off-putting, even for greenskins. I can't tell you how good it felt to fight Skaven. My archers absolutely annihilated the lightly armoured rats on the walls. I had Grotzlik and the heroes push up with the battering ram, which seemed to be ramming into nothing, and then proceeded to break apart. Good work, battering ram. As the gates were destroyed, goblins and rats swarmed against each other, the green tide pushing against the vermin tide. The Skaven leadership crumbled quicker than any goblin would as we took over control of the walls.
Should we run?
And it wasn't long before the rest of the rats followed suit, leaving piles of vermin corpses everywhere. Carrick 8 Peaks was ours. And in controlling Carrick 8 Peaks, if we could loot the treasure halls, our goblins would become even more deadly. We could also now recruit Skarsnik, who unfortunately was level 1, but he'd be of some help nonetheless. I moved Ugrok Throatcruncher towards Carrick Asgal to prepare him to take that hold, but over the turn, Clan Moors had come for Carrick 8 Peaks. I'd have to fight off the rats if I wanted to keep hold of this prize. This was the largest battle we had fought yet, 3 full Skaven armies against 3 full Greenskin armies. My plan was to set up slightly down the slope on our side of this choke point, and even though it might give the Skaven the high ground, it would block the line of sight for their weapons teams. I didn't know if we'd be able to win this battle, but what I did know is that is a lot of rats. I tried to set the gobos up in the best way I could, and despite how numerous our foe was, the green tide was equally as vast. Grotzlik, Snidey and the other gits prepared themselves for the fight of their lives. The Squighoppers had been given their one task they needed to carry out: eliminate as many Skaven weapons teams and artillery as they possibly could. And for the rest of this battle, I'll just let it play. somehow we came out of that battle on top. Carrick 8 Peaks would remain in Greenskin hands. After losing his 3 largest armies, Queek Headtaker was looking for peace, which at this point suited me, so I decided to take it. With Carrick 8 Peaks secured, I moved Grotzlik and Snidey down to Carrick Asgal, which still had a huge dwarf presence defending it. But over the turn, they had all just moved elsewhere. I mean, I know my war is scary, but come on, you guys are dwarfs. Anyway, we went for it, and with the defenders abandoning it, it was a pretty easy take. Over the turns, I'd been moving Zajar and Urk down towards the final settlement, Carrick Draz, which was unfortunately in the hands of Skaven clan Verms, who were close allies with Clan Moors. So soon after accepting peace, it looked like we were going to war once again.
Never!
Once again, the Greenskins would fight the Vermin for ultimate control of the World's Edge Mountains. And for the god knows how many times this video, I moved a battering ram up to a gate. And as the dust settled, it was none other than Urk Grimfang. I got Snidey's reinforcing army to engage the reinforcing army of the Skaven. Snidey was busy dropping the Curse of the Bad Moon on the Skaven's heads. I tried to get my squig hoppers to move through the city fast to capture the key points, but they kept getting stuck. Snidey's army had won their battle against the reinforcing Skaven and moved through the city through a crack in the wall. Meanwhile, Urk's forces were still tearing through Skaven in the middle of the city. And like the meat grinder this was, I just kept pushing the boys through the city until they reached the objectives. Towards the end of the battle, Urk spotted a lowly Skaven leader out on his own and did this to him. He chopped his fucking head off. And with that, the final hold and objective was ours. With Carrick Draz now fully under our control, it was time to rename it its proper name, Black Crag. The golden age of the dwarfs had passed. Their hegemony over the realm-spanning World's Edge Mountains now dwindled to a fraction of their former glory. Though a handful of their greatest holds remain, others litter the slopes in ruin or serve as lairs for those seeking to hold sway over these lofty heights. And with that, our campaign comes to a close. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. I sure had a lot of fun making it. Apologies it wasn't out sooner, but partway through the editing I got ill, which set me back a few days. Anyway, as always, please let me know what you did or didn't like, and if you want to see more, don't forget to subscribe. When I next see you guys, we'll be back in the jungles of Lustria, spreading all the plague and disease on the lizard men. But until then, I'll see you in the next one.